The moment I pulled back, the room changed. He was on his back with his wrists tied the way he had asked, his ankles secured, his eyes wide above the gag. The strap-on slid out of him, and I felt that sudden release in my hand, that split second where I expected relief. Instead, there was a wet sound I could not place at first. Then warmth hit my thighs and the sheets, and the smell hit the air like a door being opened to something rotten. I froze with my hand still between us, staring down at the bed like it belonged to strangers. My husband tried to speak through the gag, but all that came out was a broken, panicked noise. His chest rose too fast, then stopped, then rose again. He stared at me as if I had done it on purpose, and I stared back as if I could rewind time. It had started so differently that it felt cruel. Earlier that night, he stood in the hallway outside our bedroom and told me, in a voice that sounded careful and small, that he wanted me to peg him. He could barely look at me when he said it. This was a man who acted traditional in every other part of our life. He was the type who kept his emotions controlled. He was the type who never asked for anything that made him look vulnerable. So the request landed in my stomach like a stone. I asked him if he was serious. He nodded. His hands were tense at his sides, like he expected me to laugh. I did not laugh. I felt surprised, and then I felt something else. I felt a responsibility to not make him regret telling me. I told him we could try, but I wanted it to be safe and slow. He agreed too fast, like he had been holding his breath for years. We drove to an adult store and walked in under bright lights that made everything look too honest. He moved quickly, avoiding eye contact with the cashier, grabbing things with both hands like he had rehearsed it. A strap-on, lubricant, restraints. And then, after a pause, a gag. He held it up and said he wanted that too. I remember thinking it felt like adding weight to a bridge before we knew it could hold us. On the way home, he kept talking, too much and too fast. He told me he trusted me. He told me he wanted to feel out of control. He told me he wanted me to take charge. The more he talked, the more I tried to match his confidence, because I thought that was what he needed. I thought confidence was the same as safety. In our bedroom, the lights were low and the sheets were clean. It should have felt like our normal place, our safe place, but the bag from the store sat on the floor like evidence. When he asked me to tie him up, my hands shook. When I asked him again if he was sure, he said yes without hesitation. When the gag went in, his voice disappeared, and the silence turned heavy. It was only his breathing and the small sounds of leather and fabric, and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. At first it did not work. He tensed, and I stopped. I used more lubricant. I tried to go slower. I kept watching his face for signs of pain. He looked strained but determined, like he was trying to prove something to himself. He nodded when I asked if he wanted me to continue. He gave me small signals with his hands since he could not speak. And then, after a few tries, his body gave in a little. It started to work. For a brief moment, I felt that strange pride people talk about when they trust each other with something new. I thought, Maybe this would be awkward, but okay. Maybe we would laugh later. Maybe it would even bring us closer. Then his whole expression changed. His eyes squeezed shut hard, then opened in panic. He shook his head, sharp and fast, and his hands pulled against the ties. It was not playful anymore. It was urgent. He signaled for me to stop. I stopped immediately. I did what I thought I was supposed to do. I pulled the strap-on out. And that was when the accident happened. It was sudden and humiliating and unstoppable. It spread across the sheets and onto my skin before I even understood what I was seeing. My brain kept trying to label it as something else, something less awful. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. My husband made a strangled noise behind the gag, not from pleasure, not from anything like that, but from pure terror. He could not explain. He could not apologize. He could only stare at me while it happened. In that first second of shock, I realized the bed was not a safe place at all. It was just a place where mistakes had nowhere to go. And as the smell thickened and his eyes filled with tears, I had one clear thought that cut through everything else. I did not know how we were supposed to look at each other after this. Up to this point, our marriage felt steady. Not perfect, not like a movie, but steady in a way that made me trust the ground under my feet. We had routines that worked. We had private jokes. We knew how to calm each other down after a hard day. And in bed, we stayed inside a script that felt safe for both of us. We did not surprise each other. We did not push. If something felt awkward, we laughed and moved on. That was why his request hit me so hard. It did not match the man I thought I understood. My husband looked traditional to everyone who met him. He dressed plain. He spoke carefully. He was the kind of man who wanted to be seen as reliable. He fixed things himself. He kept our life organized. He did not like attention on him, and he did not like being the topic of a joke. When we went out with friends, he stayed polite and calm. He never acted wild. He never flirted. He never hinted at anything outside the normal picture people carried around in their heads. And I carried that picture too. I did not think of him as someone with hidden fantasies. If I was honest, I thought he did not even have many fantasies at all. I thought he liked what we already did, and he liked it because it was simple and familiar. I thought his idea of being brave was trying a new restaurant, not asking his wife for something he had probably thought about for a long time. So when I looked back on that night, the part that scared me the most was not the mess. It was the moment I realized how easily I had assumed I knew everything about him. There were small signs, but I did not see them as signs at the time. He got quiet sometimes when intimacy came up in movies. He changed the subject when friends joked about anything sexual. He acted confident, but it was a careful confidence, like he was following rules. And when I tried to ask what he liked, he gave me safe answers. He told me he was happy. He told me he did not need anything special. I believed him because it matched what I expected. I also did not want to push. I was afraid of making him feel judged. I was afraid of sounding demanding. There was a part of me that thought a good partner did not ask for too much. So I stayed in the comfortable zone with him, and I convinced myself that was what he wanted too. Then one evening, I noticed something different in him. He seemed tense in a way that did not match the day. He stayed close to me, but he did not touch me. He kept starting to speak, then stopping. It was not anger. It looked more like fear, like he had a secret in his mouth and it tasted bad, but he had to swallow it or spit it out. I asked him what was wrong, and he told me it was nothing. I let it go for a few minutes, but the silence kept building. The air between us felt crowded, like there was a third person in the room. When I asked again, I kept my voice soft. I tried to make it easy. I told him he could tell me anything. He nodded, but he still did not speak. That was when I felt the first real crack in my sense of safety, because I saw how hard he fought with himself. Whatever he wanted to say, he believed it could change how I saw him. He believed it could damage something between us that could not be repaired. And I hated that he believed that about me. I moved closer, and I took his hand, and I asked him one more time. I promised I would not laugh. I promised I would not shame him. I did not say those words to be dramatic. I said them because I saw shame already sitting in his eyes. He finally looked at me, and his face was red. His jaw tightened and released, like he was forcing himself to do it. His voice came out low and rushed, like if he spoke too slowly, he would lose his courage. In that moment, I felt two things at once. I felt love for him, because he trusted me enough to stand on the edge of embarrassment and still reach for me. And I felt fear, because I knew this could change our marriage in a single sentence. Not because the request itself was evil, because what it revealed meant I might not know him as well as I thought. And if I reacted wrong, I could teach him to hide from me forever. I remember holding his hand tighter, trying to ground him and myself at the same time. I remember thinking, if he wants it, I could try. I could be open. I could be the kind of wife he felt safe with. Then he swallowed. His eyes flicked away, and he said one sentence that changed how I saw him. He told me he wanted me to peg him. After he said it, the room felt smaller, like the walls had moved in to listen. I kept my face calm because I could see him watching me for a reaction. His shoulders were tight, and he looked like he expected me to reject him. I asked him what he meant, even though I knew. I asked if it was something he had wanted for a long time. He nodded once, fast, then looked down at the floor like he could not stand to see my eyes. I told him I was surprised, but I did not tell him no. I said I was willing to try if we did it carefully. The relief on his face scared me a little. It was too big. It made me realize how long he had carried this alone. It also made me realize how much pressure I had just taken on without fully understanding it. I asked him what he wanted it to look like. He said he wanted me to be in control. He wanted it to feel intense. He said he trusted me. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. He said he wanted restraints. He said he wanted a gag too, because it made him feel more out of control, and he did not want to talk once it started. I hesitated. I told him that scared me. I told him I needed him to be able to stop it if something felt wrong. He promised he could signal. He lifted his hand and showed me a tapping motion with his fingers, like a code. He seemed so sure of himself in that moment, like he had planned every part in his head. I should have asked more questions. I should have slowed it down right there. Instead, I heard my own voice trying to sound supportive. I said okay, but we had to go get what we needed. I meant it as a way to take control, like making a list would make it safe. We got in the car, and the drive felt louder than it should have. The road noise filled the silence. He kept clearing his throat, like he wanted to say more, but did not know how. I stared out the window and tried to sort my thoughts into neat piles. Curiosity, love, worry, a strange feeling of being tested. I remember thinking that the hardest part was already done. He had told me. I had not shamed him. We were still us. Then we pulled into the parking lot of the adult store, and reality hit me. The sign was bright, and the windows were dark. I sat in the passenger seat for a second too long. He reached for the door handle like he was about to run inside before I could change my mind. I asked him if he really wanted to do this tonight. He said yes. His voice sounded thin, but firm. Inside, the air smelled like plastic and perfume. The lights were harsh and flat, like they were designed to remove romance from the whole idea. I felt exposed, even though nobody looked at us for long. I kept imagining that everyone could tell exactly why we were there. He walked ahead of me like he knew where to go. That also surprised me. He moved with purpose, straight to an aisle, straight to a section, like he had studied it online. I followed, trying to act normal, trying to keep my face neutral. My heart beat too fast. He picked up a harness first. He checked the straps, the buckles. He held it up and asked if it looked adjustable enough. I nodded, but my mouth was dry. Then he started looking at attachments, and my eyes kept flicking to the floor, to the shelves, anywhere but the boxes. I felt like I was standing in a public place, holding a secret. He chose lubricant next, more than one bottle, like he thought more was safer. I asked him if he had read about preparation. He said yes, kind of. He said lube was important. He said going slow was important. He said he did not want to make a big deal out of it. The way he said that last part made me uneasy, because this was a big deal. Then he picked up restraints. I touched the material and felt how real it was, how it could hold someone in place. My stomach turned, not because I thought he was wrong for wanting it, but because I knew what it meant. If he panicked, I had to be the calm one. If something went wrong, I had to fix it. He stopped in front of a display of gags and looked at me for approval. His eyes were serious, almost pleading. I told him again that he needed a clear way to stop. He promised he would tap out. He promised he would not push past his limits. He said he just wanted the feeling. I tried to make a small joke, something like, "We were really doing this." My laugh sounded fake. His smile looked forced. We were both trying to pretend this was easy. At the counter, the cashier scanned everything without expression. The beep of each item felt like a stamp on a contract. I stared at the card reader and thought about backing out. I thought about telling him we should wait, that we should research more, that we should not rush into it because we were embarrassed. But then I pictured his face when he first told me, the fear of being judged, and I swallowed my doubt. On the way home, the bag sat between us like a third passenger. He kept reaching over and touching it, like he had to confirm it was real. He told me he was excited. He told me he was nervous too. I asked him again if he had prepared his body for it, and he said he was fine. He said he did not want to overthink it. He said we had lube and we had time, and that was enough. That should have been the moment I stopped the car and said no. Instead, I nodded. I told myself that couples tried new things all the time. I told myself that being supportive mattered more than being afraid. I told myself that buying the right gear meant we were prepared. When we got home, he carried the bag like it was fragile. He moved quickly, almost impatient. He kissed me like he was trying to prove this would be good for us. And I let myself believe, for a few minutes, that this could be simple. We had no plan beyond the items in that bag. No real conversation about what could go wrong. No clear agreement about what to do if his body reacted badly. We treated it like a purchase, like equipment could replace knowledge. They thought buying gear meant they were prepared, but buying equipment was not the same as being ready, and I was about to learn that in the worst possible way. We carried the bag into the bedroom like it was a dare we had both agreed to accept. The door clicked shut behind us, and for a second I hated how normal the room looked. Same dresser, same laundry basket, same bed we had slept in 100 times. The only difference was the new items laid out on the blanket, shiny and unfamiliar, like tools on a tray. My husband stood at the foot of the bed and kept rubbing his palms together. His face looked flushed, but his eyes looked scared. I asked him again if he wanted to do it tonight. I asked it slowly, clearly, because I needed to hear him choose it with full awareness. He nodded hard. He said yes, and his voice shook. I told him we could stop at any time. I told him if he felt pain, we stopped. If he felt panic, we stopped. He agreed. He promised he would tell me. Then he reminded me about the gag and the restraints. That was when the air shifted. It stopped feeling like we were trying something new together. It started feeling like I was responsible for everything that happened next. I told him I did not like the idea of him being unable to speak. He insisted. He said it was part of what he wanted. He said he would use a signal. He held up his hand and tapped his fingers twice against his palm, like a rehearsed emergency button. I repeated it back to him. 2 taps meant stop. No questions. delay. He agreed again, almost too quickly, like he wanted to lock it in before I changed my mind. I opened the lubricant and put it within reach. I adjusted the harness with clumsy hands. My fingers fumbled with straps that did not feel like they belonged in my life. He watched me closely, like he was studying my face to see if I regretted this. I did not want to scare him, so I kept my voice calm and steady even though my stomach felt tight. I asked him to lie down, and he did. When I lifted the restraints, he nodded at them like he was proud of himself for asking. I wrapped them around his wrists and ankles the way the packaging showed. I tested them gently, making sure I could undo them quickly. He swallowed and looked away as I tightened the last strap. I could see the tension in his neck. He breathed in short bursts, as if he was trying to stay brave. I leaned close and asked him one more time, "Are you sure?" He said yes. Then he asked for the gag. My hand paused in the air. I hated that a simple piece of material could erase his voice. I told him I needed him to be able to breathe. I told him if he gagged or choked, I was taking it out. He nodded again, and I placed it carefully. When it was secure, his words disappeared, and the room became filled with only breath and small sounds of movement against the bed. I had never heard my own house so quiet. I climbed onto the bed and positioned myself the way I thought I should. My heart was beating so fast it made me lightheaded. I kept looking at his eyes. He looked back at me with something like excitement, but it was mixed with fear. That mix made me uneasy because fear could turn to panic fast. I started slowly. At first, it did not work. His body tensed hard, and he made a strained sound into the gag. I stopped immediately. I waited. I rubbed his leg and asked him with my eyes if he was okay. He nodded once, but the nod looked forced. I used more lubricant. I tried again with less pressure, giving him time. His hands pulled slightly against the restraints, not enough to break them, just enough to show me he felt trapped inside his own skin. I stopped again. My throat felt tight. I whispered that we did not have to do this. I reminded him he could stop. He shook his head no, quick and desperate. Then he nodded yes, like he was begging me to keep going. He breathed through his nose in sharp pulls, trying to control himself. I tried a third time slower, and I watched his face instead of the movement. I watched his eyebrows pinch, his jaw clench, then loosen. I watched him fight his own reflexes. He gave a small nod, a real one this time. His breathing steadied for a few seconds. I felt him adjust, like his body finally made room for what he wanted. That was the first moment I thought, okay, maybe we can do this. I checked in again. He lifted his hand as much as the restraint allowed and gave me a thumbs up. It looked shaky, but it was clear. I moved a little more, still slow, still careful. I kept my hand on his stomach to feel his breathing. Every time he tensed, I stopped. Every time he relaxed, I continued. Then something changed. He started responding differently. His eyes focused on me. His breathing got deeper. The tension in his shoulders dropped, He made muffled sounds into the gag that did not sound like fear anymore. He looked present. He looked like he had reached the place he had imagined. And because he looked okay, I let my own fear loosen. I started to feel in control. I sat up more. I moved with more confidence. I increased the intensity in small steps, each time watching his face for warning signs. He seemed excited. His eyes stayed wide and bright. He pulled against the restraints in a way that looked intentional now, like part of the experience he wanted. He nodded at me, urging me on. In my head, I told myself this was working. I told myself the awkward parts were behind us. I told myself I had passed the hardest moment, and now I just had to keep the rhythm, keep the control, keep him safe. The bed creaked softly under us. The room smelled like lubricant and warm skin. The gag made his sounds distant, like they belonged to someone else. Then, without warning, his whole face tightened. It happened in a blink. His eyes squeezed shut and then snapped open. The color drained from his face so fast it scared me. His body jerked against the restraints, not in excitement, but in alarm. His breathing turned sharp and fast, like he could not get enough air. I froze immediately. I leaned down close, searching his eyes. I asked him if he was okay, even though he could not answer. He shook his head hard. Then he lifted his hand as far as it would go and tapped his fingers twice, fast and frantic. He signaled to stop. The second I saw the stop signal, I went cold. His fingers tapped twice, fast and messy, like he was trying to break through glass. His eyes locked on mine and begged me without words. The gag kept him silent, but his face said everything. Fear, regret, a warning that something inside him had shifted. I stopped moving right away. I held still, hovering over him, trying to understand what changed so suddenly. My mind ran through every possibility in a fast loop. Pain, injury, panic. I told myself I had to be calm. I told myself I had to do the safest thing. I started to pull back, slowly, the way people said you should. I tried to keep my hands steady. I tried to keep my breathing even so he would not feel my fear. Then it happened. At first, I heard it more than I saw it. A wet release, soft but unmistakable. It sounded wrong in our bedroom. It sounded like an accident that belonged somewhere else, somewhere far away from the bed we shared. Then I felt warmth against my skin. For a split second, my brain refused to name it. I stared down like I was looking at a stain from a spilled drink, like if I blinked it would turn into something normal. But the smell rose fast, heavy and sharp, and it hit the back of my throat. It was not subtle. It was not something I could pretend was anything else. I froze with the harness still on my hips, my hand still hovering, my mouth open in silence. My husband's whole body went rigid against the restraints. His eyes went wide in horror. He made a desperate sound behind the gag, a muffled cry that had nowhere to go. He tried to pull his wrists free, not to fight me, to escape his own embarrassment. The restraints held him in place, and that made it worse. It made it feel like he was trapped inside the worst moment of his life. I looked at him, and he looked at me, and we both understood the same thing at the same time. This was not fantasy anymore. This was reality, ugly, uncontrollable, and deeply human. A single moment turned play into crisis. My thoughts scattered. I felt disgust, but I also felt fear. Fear that I had hurt him. Fear that he would think I was judging him. Fear that he would never trust me again. I wanted to protect him from shame, but I did not know how. The room felt too small for what was happening. The sheets felt like evidence. The smell felt like it was climbing into my hair and skin. He tried to speak again, but the gag only turned his panic into noise. That was when my focus snapped to the gag. I should have removed it right then. I knew that. I knew he needed air and words and control. But my brain was not working in a straight line. It was jumping from problem to problem like a person trying to put out a fire with bare hands. The mess spread as he strained and moved. It got on the bed, on the sheets, on me. It was not a small accident you could wipe quickly. It was sudden and chaotic, and I could not stop staring at it. I heard myself whispering, "No, no, no," like a prayer. Like if I said it enough times, it would reverse. My husband's eyes filled with tears. He shook his head hard, not at me, but at the situation, at his body, at the fact that he had wanted this, and now he was trapped in it. The shame on his face was so strong it made my stomach twist. I tried to think of what to do first. Untie him, remove the gag, get him to the bathroom, strip the bed, clean. All of those thoughts hit at once, and I could not choose. Instead, I did something stupid. My brain grabbed one idea, one desperate, illogical idea that felt like action. It felt like fixing. It felt like if I could just stop the mess from coming out, everything would pause long enough for me to get control again. I thought if I put it back in, it might block it. It might stop it. It might keep it contained until I could clean. I did not even fully decide it. My hands moved before my mind caught up. I leaned forward, trying to position myself again with shaking legs. I kept telling myself I was helping. I kept telling myself I was stopping it from getting worse. My husband saw what I was doing, and his eyes changed. He shook his head harder. His breathing turned frantic. He made a muffled sound that did not sound like pleasure or excitement or anything we had planned. It sounded like pure alarm. I hesitated for half a second, but I was already committed to the motion. My mind had narrowed down to one goal: stop the mess, stop the humiliation, stop the moment. The smell rose again as I shifted, and it hit me like a wave. My throat tightened. My stomach lurched. I tried to breathe through my nose, and it made it worse. The bedroom air felt thick, like it had turned into something I had to push through. My husband started gagging behind the gag. It was a horrible, trapped sound. He could not open his mouth. He could not spit. He could not tell me what he needed. His whole face turned red with effort, and his eyes squeezed shut as his body fought itself. That was when the full weight of what I had done landed on me. I had taken a situation that was already humiliating and risky, and I had added a new danger. I had left him restrained. I had left him unable to speak. And now he was gagging, panicking, and I was still trying to fix a mess like it mattered more than his breath. My own stomach rolled again, hard enough that my eyes watered. I felt hot saliva flood my mouth. I swallowed it down and tasted bile. My hands shook so badly I could not tell if I was about to cry or throw up. I finally reached for the gag strap, but my fingers slipped because everything felt slick and wrong. My heart hammered. My husband's eyes opened again, wild and wet, and he stared at me like he did not know if I could help him. Her next choice made the panic worse. When people panicked, they did not think clearly. I learned that in real time, with my hands shaking and my mind locked onto one stupid goal. I thought if I could stop the mess from spreading, I could fix everything else after. I thought containment meant control. I thought control meant safety. So I tried to reinsert it. My husband's head thrashed against the pillow. His eyes went wide and wet, and he shook his head so hard it looked like it hurt. He pulled against the restraints in a way that was not part of any fantasy. He looked trapped, not turned on. He made a muffled sound behind the gag that came out as a harsh, broken noise. That sound should have stopped me. It should have cut through my panic like a knife. Instead, my panic argued back. It told me he was reacting because he was overwhelmed. It told me if I moved fast, the moment would end sooner. It told me anything was better than standing there covered in a disaster, staring at each other like strangers. I pushed forward anyway, clumsy and desperate. The smell thickened as I moved, and my stomach rolled so hard my vision blurred. I felt a hot rush in my throat. I tried to swallow it down, but my body rejected the idea. My gag reflex fired like an alarm. I froze again, hunched over him, breathing through my nose, even though it made the smell sharper. I heard him gagging behind the gag, a horrible trapped choking sound that made my skin go cold. That was when the real danger landed in my head. He could not spit. He could not cough freely. He could not tell me what was happening. If he vomited with that gag in, he could choke. I had put him in a situation where his body was out of control, and I had removed his voice. I had turned his private fantasy into a safety problem. I yanked my hands away from everything and reached for the gag strap. My fingers slipped. The strap felt too tight. The buckle felt too small. My hands shook like I was trying to pick a lock in the dark. My husband's eyes stayed locked on mine, begging me to hurry. He made another gagging sound, and his face went red with effort. Tears ran into his hairline. I got the buckle loose and pulled the gag out. The moment it came free, he coughed hard and sucked in air like he had been underwater. He made a raw sound that was half cough, half sob. Then he gagged again, now able to open his mouth, and his whole body curled against the restraints as he fought for breath. I tried to sit back, but I only made it a few inches before my own stomach finally won. I turned my head just in time and vomited onto the side of the bed and onto the floor. It came up fast, with no warning beyond the pressure in my throat. My eyes watered so hard I could barely see. I tasted acid and fear. The sound of me being sick seemed to trigger him. He gagged again and vomited too, turning his head as much as he could with his arms tied. It was chaotic and terrible, like our bodies had decided to copy each other's panic. The bed became the center of a disaster that kept expanding. I heard myself making small crying noises between heaves. I did not even recognize my own voice. I was not thinking about anything except how wrong everything felt and how trapped we were inside it. My husband made a broken apology between coughs. I could barely understand him at first. His voice sounded torn, like his throat was scraped raw. He kept saying, "I am sorry, over and over, like if he said it enough times, he could erase what was happening. I tried to answer him, but my mouth kept filling with saliva and nausea. I leaned off the bed again and gagged. My body shook. My skin felt too tight. My nose burned with the smell of everything mixed together. I looked at him and saw how helpless he was. He was still restrained. His face was streaked with tears. His eyes were wide and empty, like he had left his own body and was watching this from far away. He kept swallowing and coughing, trying to control himself, but his breathing stayed uneven. I reached for the restraints with shaking hands. I fumbled at knots and clips. I did not know what I was doing fast enough. I kept thinking, get him free, get him to the bathroom, get him cleaned, get him away from the bed, away from the mess, away from me seeing him like this. He kept flinching when I touched him, not because I hurt him, but because he was embarrassed to be touched at all. His whole body seemed to radiate shame. He kept turning his face away from mine, like he could not stand to see what I might be feeling. I was feeling too much at once. I felt disgust at the smell, and the fluids, and the ruined sheets. I felt guilt because I had tried to force a fix instead of stopping. I felt fear because I had seen how quickly a fantasy could become unsafe. I felt heartbreak because the man I loved looked like he wanted to disappear. I finally got one wrist free, then the other. His hands flew to his face immediately, covering his eyes. He made a sound like a sob that he tried to swallow. I untied his ankles next, and he curled inward, pulling his knees up like he could hide inside himself. I asked him if he could stand. He nodded, but it was weak. He looked at the bed and then at me, and his face twisted like he was going to be sick again. I started wiping at the sheets with tissues, then stopped because because it was pointless. The tissues dissolved. My hands came away dirty. I stared at them like they belonged to someone else. My brain kept trying to find a clean path through an unclean moment. My husband whispered that he did not prepare, that he thought it would be fine, that he was sorry. His voice cracked, and he started crying again. I started crying too, not loud at first, just silent tears and shaking breaths. The room felt unreal, like it had tilted. The bed creaked as we shifted away from the center of the mess, both of us afraid to touch anything. We stood there, half naked, exhausted, trembling, looking at the ruin we had made, and the ruin we feared we had made inside our marriage. Now we were both sick, crying, and still not sure what to do. We stayed standing on opposite sides of the bed, both of us breathing like we had run a long distance, but we had not gone anywhere. The mess sat between us like a third person. The sheets were ruined. The smell clung to the room. My skin felt dirty no matter how I wiped it. My husband kept his arms crossed over his chest like he wanted to hide his body from me. His eyes were swollen and red, and he stared at the wall instead of my face. I wanted to say something comforting. I wanted to tell him it was okay, that accidents happened, that I still loved him. But the words stuck because my brain kept replaying the last few minutes in pieces. The tapping fingers, his panic, the sound of gagging. The moment I realized I had made it more dangerous by leaving that gag in, I could not stop thinking about how close it felt to something worse. He whispered my name. It was the first time he said anything that sounded like him again. His voice was small, like he expected me to be angry. He asked what we were supposed to do now. That question hit me hard because it was not really about cleaning. It was about whether we could stay in the same room without collapsing. It was about whether this would become a secret we never touched again. It was about whether he had just shown me the most private part of himself and been punished for it in the most humiliating way possible. I forced myself to answer with something practical, because practical was easier than emotional. I told him we had to clean. I told him we would strip the bed, bag everything, and take showers. I said it quickly, like giving instructions could keep both of us from falling apart. He nodded without looking at me. When I stepped closer to the bed, my body reacted before my mind did. My stomach tightened again. The smell was worse up close. My throat burned. I had to swallow hard just to keep from gagging again. I saw my husband notice that reaction, and his face changed. It was not anger, it was pain. He looked like he had expected disgust. He looked like he had been waiting for it. Like this moment had confirmed his worst fear about himself. I tried to fix it with words. I told him I was not disgusted by him. I told him I was overwhelmed by the situation. Even as I said it, I was not sure he believed me. I was not sure I believed myself because my body kept reacting in ways I could not control. That was the cruel part. We had just learned that bodies did whatever they wanted, no matter what people promised. We moved like strangers, doing a task together. I grabbed a trash bag from the bathroom cabinet. He stood still, frozen, like he did not want to touch anything. I told him to start pulling the sheets off from his side while I did my side. He hesitated, then reached out with 2 fingers like the fabric was dangerous. The sheets came up in heavy, wet folds. The sound was awful, a quiet peeling sound that made my skin crawl. I tried to keep my face blank because I did not want him to see me react again. My hands shook as I gathered everything into a bundle, trying not to drip on the carpet. He kept glancing at me and then away. That glance felt like a question. Are you leaving me after this? Are you going to laugh about this later? Are you going to tell anyone? I wanted to say, I would never. I wanted to promise him that this stayed between us. But I also felt a new fear underneath everything else. A fear that I would remember this every time we touched. A fear that attraction could not survive humiliation. The silence grew heavier as the bed became bare. The mattress looked stained in the dim light. I stared at it and felt something like grief. It was stupid, but it felt like we had ruined a safe place, like the room itself had changed. My husband spoke again, barely above a whisper. He said he was sorry. He said he should have prepared. He said he thought it would be fine. He said he did not know his body would do that. I did not know how to answer, because if I said it was okay, it felt like a lie. It was not okay. If I said, you should have prepared, it sounded like blame. And blame felt dangerous in that moment, like it could turn shame into something permanent. So I told him we both made choices. I told him I should have stopped sooner. I told him I should not have panicked. The moment I said it, I saw him flinch like I had struck him, not because I blamed him, but because he could hear the truth in it. We tied the bag and set it near the door. I grabbed wipes and paper towels and started scrubbing the mattress, even though I knew it might not be salvageable. He stood behind me, silent, then joined in, wiping without speaking. Every time our hands got too close, we pulled away like magnets turned the wrong way. That distance hurt more than the mess. I kept thinking about the moment he tapped to stop, and how fast everything fell apart. We had built this whole night on trust and control, and it had turned into a scene where neither of us had either. The real problem was no longer the mess. It was the feeling. It was the feeling of being exposed in front of the person who knew you best. It was the feeling that you could never be fully clean again, even after soap and water. It was the feeling that something private had escaped and could not be put back. After we wiped what we could, we stood there again, breathing, listening to the quiet house around us. The rest of the world felt too normal, like it did not match what had happened in this room. My husband asked if we should just throw everything out. The harness, the restraints, the sheets. He said it like he wanted to erase the entire idea. I stared at the bag and nodded. I told him we could decide later what to keep. I told him to go shower. I said I would be right behind him. He walked to the bathroom without looking back. I gathered the trash bags, trying to move carefully, trying not to drip, trying not to gag again. My hands were raw from wiping. My eyes stung from crying. I reached for the bedroom door so I could take the bags out to the main bin, and for a moment, I believed the worst part was over. Then the bedroom door opened. As bad as it was, it could still get worse. I opened the bedroom door with 2 heavy trash bags in my hands, trying to move without looking back at the bare mattress. The hallway light spilled in, bright and wrong. For one quiet second, I thought the air outside the room would feel cleaner. Then I heard quick nails on the floor. Our dog shot down the hallway like it had been waiting for a chance. I had not even seen it at first. It slipped past my legs, low and fast, head down, focused on the smell. I said its name sharply, but my voice came out weak and cracked. The dog did not slow down. It ran straight to the bed. My brain lagged behind my eyes. I watched it leap up with the kind of happy energy dogs had when they thought something interesting had appeared just for them. Its tail wagged hard, thumping the air. Its nose went straight to the worst spot, the place we had not fully cleaned, the place we had tried not to stare at. And then it started licking. For half a second, I could not move. It felt impossible, like a bad dream that did not follow normal rules. The room already smelled awful, but the sound of licking made it unbearable. Wet, eager, loud. The dog acted like it had found a treat. I made a choking noise and dropped one of the trash bags. The bag hit the floor and split slightly, and something inside shifted with a heavy thud. That sound snapped me back into my body. I lunged toward the bed. I shouted no, louder this time, and clapped my hands once. The dog did not even look at me. It kept licking with full commitment, as if my panic was background noise. My stomach flipped so hard I had to grab the bed frame to stay upright. I dry heaved hard. My throat burned and my eyes filled with water. I tasted acid again, and the memory of earlier came rushing back. It felt like my body recognized the situation and decided it was time to be sick all over again. From the bathroom doorway, my husband made a sound I had never heard from him before. It was a sharp, broken gasp, followed by gagging. He had come back to see what the noise was, and the moment he saw the dog, his face collapsed. He doubled over and retched into his hand. The humiliation on him turned into something worse. It looked like defeat. Like the universe had taken the most private, fragile part of him and dragged it into the open, even though we were still alone. I reached for the dog's collar, but my hands hesitated in midair. I did not want to touch its mouth. I did not want to touch anything in that area. But the dog's head kept moving, quick and busy, and it spread the mess further with every second. I grabbed the collar anyway. The dog pulled back playfully, thinking it was a game. It shook its head once, stubborn, and tried to lean in for another lick. That movement made me gag again. My whole body shook, not from fear of danger, but from a kind of deep disgust that made my skin crawl. I yanked harder, and the dog slid across the sheets, leaving streaks where it should not have left anything. My husband turned his head away, eyes squeezed shut, and he gagged again. He made a small crying sound between coughs. I could not tell if he was crying from nausea or shame. It did not matter. It was both. I dragged the dog off the bed and toward the hallway. It resisted, nails scraping the floor, twisting its body to look back at the bed like it could not believe I was stealing its prize. I kept pulling, whispering frantic commands. Stop. Leave it. No. Go. My voice sounded thin and desperate. The dog finally hopped forward, then tried to turn again, and I lost my grip for 1 second. It shot back into the room, quick as a spark, and jumped up again. That second felt like an hour. I heard my husband gag loudly behind me, and then I heard him retch, this time without holding it back. The sound made my stomach clench. I felt the same rush in my throat, and I had to swallow hard and breathe shallow to keep from joining him. I snapped. I grabbed the dog with both hands, one at the collar and one under its chest, and lifted it off the bed. It squirmed, surprised, legs pedaling the air. I carried it down the hallway, ignoring the smell on its face and the way it tried to lick the air. I shoved the back door open and set the dog outside. It landed on the porch, blinked at me, then wagged its tail like it had done nothing wrong. I slammed the door. The quiet afterward was worse than the noise. It was the kind of quiet that made you hear your own breathing and realize you were shaking. I stood with my back against the door, eyes closed, trying to calm my stomach. My hands felt contaminated. My hair smelled wrong. My whole body felt like it needed to be scrubbed raw. Behind me, from the bedroom, I heard my husband whisper, almost to himself, "Please, not please help me clean, not please forgive me, just please," like he wanted the night to stop existing. I walked back toward the bedroom with slow steps, like I was walking toward a scene I could not undo. The bed looked worse now. The air looked thicker, even though I knew air did not work that way. The trash bags sat by the door like proof that we had tried to handle it and failed. My husband stood near the bathroom, pale and shaking, eyes fixed on the bed, then on me. He looked like he did not know where to put his hands, where to put his shame, where to put his trust. Now we had to clean everything and face each other. We moved like we were in a disaster zone, not a bedroom. I picked up the torn trash bag first and retied it with shaking hands. My husband held the other bag open without speaking. We dropped ruined paper towels, wipes, and anything we could not save into plastic like we were trying to hide evidence. Every time the bag shifted, and the smell rose. My stomach tightened, and my eyes watered again. He kept his face turned slightly away from me, like he could not stand to see my expression. I kept my eyes on the work, because the moment I looked at him, I pictured his stop signal and the panic in his eyes. The memory made my throat burn. We stripped what was left from the bed in layers. The top sheet, the fitted sheet, the protector. Each piece came off heavy and damp, and each piece made a sound that reminded me of what had happened. I tried to fold them into themselves to keep the mess inside, but nothing stayed contained for long. We shoved everything into another bag, knotted it tight, and double bagged it without discussing whether we were saving any of it. I did not want to talk about money, but I felt it anyway. The sheets had been a nice set. The protector had been expensive. The mattress had been new enough that it still felt like something we were proud of. Watching it all become trash felt like losing more than fabric. It felt like we had ruined something clean and safe, and now we had to sleep on the proof. My husband grabbed a spray cleaner with both hands and stared at the label like he needed instructions for how to erase a night. He sprayed too much at first, then stopped, then sprayed again. His movements were stiff and careful, like he was afraid any sudden motion would make him sick again. I knelt at the edge of the bed and scrubbed the mattress in small circles until my wrist cramped. The cleaner smell mixed with everything else and turned sharp in my nose. I kept swallowing to fight nausea. Tears dropped onto the mattress and disappeared into the damp patch, and I hated myself for crying while I cleaned, but I could not stop. My husband started on the carpet near the bed. I heard the rough sound of paper towels dragging across fibers. I heard him inhale through his mouth like he was trying not to smell. Once he gagged hard and had to grip the dresser until it passed. When he looked up at me after, his eyes were empty with embarrassment. I wanted to say it was okay, but my mouth stayed shut. Comfort felt dangerous, like it could turn into blame, and blame felt like it would destroy us. We worked in silence and only communicated with small gestures. Hand me that. Move this. Hold the bag open. I watched him avoid the corner where we had left the restraints and the harness. They sat on the floor like a dead thing. He would not look at them. I picked them up with a paper towel barrier and shoved them into a bag. The sound of plastic closing made him flinch. He whispered that we should throw it all out. I nodded, because I could not imagine trying to use any of it again. Not after this. Not after the gag, the panic, the sounds. We carried the bags out to the bin one by one. The hallway felt too bright. The house felt too quiet. Our dog scratched at the back door from outside, confused and impatient. I did not let it in. I could not handle the idea of it licking my hands or jumping on my legs. I needed everything still. Back in the bedroom, we wiped down surfaces like we were disinfecting a crime scene. The bed frame, the nightstand, the door handle, even the wall near the bed, because in my mind, the night had touched everything. My husband washed his hands at least 5 times at the sink, and every time he finished, he stared at his fingers like he expected them to stay dirty. When we finally stepped into the shower, the water hit my skin and I started crying again. I scrubbed until my skin went pink. Soap did not feel like soap. It felt like an apology that did not work. My husband stood under the water with his head bowed, shoulders shaking. He did not look at me. He did not reach for me. He just let the water run like he wanted it to erase his body. When I turned off the water, I still smelled it in my nose. I brushed my teeth hard enough to make my gums sting. I brushed again. I rinsed until my mouth felt raw. My husband brushed too, spitting and rinsing like he was trying to remove the memory. We went back into the bedroom, and the air still felt wrong. The mattress was damp in spots. The carpet looked cleaner, but not clean. The room did not feel like ours anymore. It felt like a place that had witnessed something we were not ready to name. We found an old set of sheets in the closet, the kind we used when we had guests. They did not match. They were thin. They smelled like storage. We made the bed with quick hands, avoiding touching each other. My husband pulled the corners tight, like he could control at least that. Then I sprayed air freshener until my eyes watered. I lit candles even though it was late, and I hated the idea of masking anything. The scent was too sweet, too cheerful, and it made the whole situation feel worse. Like we were trying to pretend it had been romantic. My husband sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. His hair was wet and messy. His face looked older than it had a few hours earlier. I stood near the dresser, holding the spray can, and realized my hands still shook. He asked, very quietly, if I hated him. That question punched through me. I shook my head fast and said no. I said I loved him. I said I was sorry too, for panicking, for making it worse, for not keeping him safe the way I promised. My voice broke in the middle of the sentence, and I had to cover my mouth. He stared at his knees like he could not accept kindness from me without feeling smaller. We cried again, not loudly, just a few broken breaths each. The crying stopped and started like a faucet with bad pressure. Eventually, we turned off the lights and lay down on top of the covers, leaving space between us. The candles flickered on the dresser and threw soft shadows against the wall, and the shadows made the room look unfamiliar. My husband faced away. I faced the ceiling. I listened to his breathing, waiting for him to speak. When it was finally quiet, they still could not talk. We lay in the dark, with the new sheets pulled tight, and the space between our bodies felt wider than the bed. My husband faced the wall. I faced the ceiling. The candles had burned down to small pools of wax, and the air still held a mix of cleaner, sweet scent and something I could not pretend was gone. Every time I inhaled too deeply, my stomach tightened again. I listened to him breathe and tried to guess what he was thinking, but his breathing stayed careful, like he did not want to take up space. I waited for him to say anything, a joke, an apology, anger, anything that proved we were still the same two people. Nothing came. I tried to speak once. I said his name in a whisper, and the sound fell into the room like a pebble into deep water. He did not answer right away. When he finally did, he only said yeah in a flat voice, like he was afraid of what might follow. I had 100 sentences in my throat. I still loved you. I did not blame you. I was scared too. I was sorry I froze. I was sorry I made it worse. But every sentence felt like it could open a door we could not close again. I pictured his stop signal. I pictured his face. I pictured the dog. My throat tightened, and I stayed quiet. At some point, I felt him shift, just enough to pull the blanket higher over his shoulder. It was a small movement, but it felt like he was building a wall. I turned on my side, away from him, not because I wanted distance, but because I did not know how to be close without bringing the whole night back into the air between us. Sleep came in short pieces. I woke up to the sound of the house settling. I woke up to my own thoughts looping. I woke up when my husband got up to use the bathroom and returned without turning on a light. I could hear him rinse his mouth again at the sink, like he could not stop trying to erase the taste of panic. When morning finally arrived, it did not feel like a reset. It felt like the same nightmare, just in daylight. I got out of bed and saw the room clearly for the first time. The carpet still looked damp in one area. The mattress had faint stains that did not belong there. The trash had been taken out, but the memory stayed behind like a shadow that did not match the shape of anything in the room. My husband stood near the closet, pulling on clothes with his back to me. He moved quietly, careful not to make the hangers clink. That silence felt planned, like he did not want noise to invite conversation. I asked if he was okay. He paused for 1 second, then said he was fine. His voice did not sound fine. He kept facing the closet. I wanted to ask if he was hurt. I wanted to ask if he was angry. I wanted to ask if he still trusted me. But the words felt dangerous again. I did not want to make him relive it out loud. I did not want to hear him say he regretted trusting me. I did not want to hear him say he never wanted to try anything like that again. So I asked a smaller question. I asked if he wanted coffee. He said sure. In the kitchen, we moved around each other like coworkers. We avoided brushing hands. We avoided standing too close at the counter. When the dog scratched at the back door, I let it in and immediately watched its face, checking its mouth like I could still see what had happened. The dog ran in, happy and normal, and that normalness made me feel worse. My husband did not look at the dog. He did not look at me. We drank coffee in silence. The only words we used were short and practical. Are you working today? Do we have more detergent? Did you take the bags out? Every normal sentence felt fake, like we were acting out a script of marriage, while something rotten sat underneath the floorboards. I kept trying to measure the damage by watching his face. When he stared into his mug, I saw shame like a physical weight on him. When he swallowed, I remembered the gag. When he cleared his throat, I remembered gagging and vomiting, and the way his eyes had begged me to make it stop. I wondered if I had broken something in him by seeing him in that moment, and I wondered if he had broken something in me. It was not only disgust, it was fear. Fear that our bedroom would never feel safe again. Fear that any touch would bring back the smell and the helplessness. Fear that the private part of our marriage had been stained in a way that soap could not fix. I also felt guilty for thinking that, because my husband had trusted me with a secret desire. He had asked for something vulnerable. He had tried to let me see him fully, and the night had punished him for it in the worst way. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes flicked across my face like he was searching for a reaction he could not survive. I forced my expression into something gentle. I nodded once, like a promise I could not explain. He nodded back, but it did not relax him. It only ended the moment faster. After he left the kitchen, I stayed at the table and stared at my phone. My hands felt cold. My chest felt tight. I realized the loudest part of the night was what we did not say. I needed to tell someone, but I could not imagine saying it out loud to a friend. I could not imagine admitting it to my sister. I could not imagine looking anyone in the eye afterward. So I did the safest and most cowardly thing I could think of. I opened the internet and started typing. I posted the story with my hands still smelling like soap and cleaner, even after I had scrubbed them raw. I kept my details vague enough to protect him, but not vague enough to hide what happened. The moment I hit submit, I felt a new kind of fear. Not fear of the mess, fear of judgment. My phone started buzzing so fast it felt like it was alive. Comments stacked up in minutes, and every new notification made my stomach tighten. I told myself I had wanted advice. I told myself strangers could be kinder than silence. The internet reacted in every possible way. The first camp hit me like a lecture from a strict teacher. Preparation first. These people did not focus on what we had done. They focused on what we had not done. They told me basic prep existed for this. They listed it like a checklist. Eat carefully. Wait. Use the bathroom. Use protection for the bed. Have extra towels ready. Do not treat the bed like a target you had to keep clean in the middle of panic. They told me accidents were common when people rushed, and it did not mean anything was wrong with him as a person. One comment stayed in my head. They said prevention was not about shame. It was about respect for the body. They said if we had planned like adults, it would have been less chaotic, and our marriage would not have taken the hit. That camp made me angry and relieved at the same time. Angry because it felt like being scolded while I was still shaking. Relieved because it suggested a simple truth. We had walked into something advanced with beginner planning. The second camp was colder. Consent and safety. These comments did not joke. They did not care about embarrassment. They cared about risk. They pointed straight at the restraints and the gag. They said that combination added danger even for experienced couples. They said safe words did not work if someone could not speak. They said a tapping signal could fail in panic, and the person on top could miss it. They said breathing and vomiting were real risks, not fantasy risks. They told me to stop immediately the second he signaled, no matter what the situation looked like. They told me I had done the right thing removing the gag, but they also told me it should not have been there in the first place if we were experimenting for the first time. One person said something that made my chest go tight. They said the accident was not the scariest moment. The scariest moment was the second I realized he could not safely gag or vomit with his mouth blocked. That camp did not shame me, but it did something else. It made the night feel sharper, like a near miss I had been too embarrassed to name. The third camp felt like a hand on my shoulder. Accidents happen. These people talked about bodies in a way that was simple and human. They told stories of their own awkward nights, their own ruined sheets, their own moments of panic. They said not to link the accident to his character, masculinity, or worth. They said accidents were not a moral failure. They said the worst thing I could do was let my disgust become the story he remembered. They told me to comfort him the way I would want comfort if roles were reversed. They told me the words I had not been able to say. You did not do anything wrong by wanting something. You are not gross. You are not broken. One comment said to separate the act from the accident. They said what happened was a body event, not a relationship event, unless we turned it into one. That camp made me cry again at my kitchen table, because it was the first time I felt like someone understood the difference between what I had seen and what I feared it meant. The fourth camp came in loud and blunt. Too much too fast. These people sounded frustrated, like they had watched someone slam the gas pedal in a storm. They said we had increased intensity too quickly. They said first attempts should be slow, simple, and calm. No extra layers. No restraints. No performance pressure. They told me to learn anatomy, packing, and comfort signals before adding anything that reduced control. Some of them focused on me trying to fix the mess by reinserting it. They said panic made people do strange things, but they also said it showed how unprepared we were for what a stop signal meant. Stop meant stop. Not stop for a second. Not stop after one last action. Not stop once the problem felt contained. They said packing was a skill, not a mood. They said if we tried again, we should treat it like learning, not like a scene we had to complete. I hated how right that sounded, because it meant admitting we had played with something we did not understand. It also meant the night was not cursed. It was rushed. The fifth camp was the one I needed most, and the one I feared most: relationship repair. These people did not talk about toys first. They talked about after. They asked if we had done aftercare. Not in a romantic way, in a human way. They said after something intense and humiliating, both people needed reassurance, not silence. They said we needed to talk while calm, not while gagging and crying, but soon enough that it did not turn into a permanent bruise. They said to apologize without blaming. They said to name what went wrong. They said to set boundaries clearly. No gag if there was any nausea risk. No restraints until we trusted our signals. A clear stop action. A plan for cleanup before we started, so panic did not take over. One comment said something that felt like it was aimed straight at my marriage. They said the real repair was not the room. It was the feeling of safety between two people who had seen each other at their most exposed. That line made me look toward the hallway, toward the closed bedroom door, and wonder if my husband felt safe with me anymore. I had tried to be supportive. I had also panicked. Both things were true at the same time. Then the sixth camp arrived, and it made me want to throw my phone across the room. Comedy and shock. These people laughed like it was a scene from a movie. They wrote about the dog like it was the punchline of the century. They said the dog was the true villain. They said it escalated like a disaster film. They said the whole thing was unbelievable. They joked about candles and air freshener like it was an attempt to cover a crime. A few comments were cruel. Not just laughing at the situation, but laughing at him, calling him names, saying he deserved it, making it about masculinity in the ugliest way. I stared at those words until my eyes blurred. My throat tightened the way it had the night before, but this time it was not nausea. It was anger and fear mixed together. I had posted anonymously, but my husband was not anonymous to me. He was the man in our house, moving quietly, avoiding my eyes. For a second, I regretted posting at all. Then I saw another kind of comment inside that same camp. People who laughed, but also admitted they laughed because it was too intense to hold in the mind. They said humor was how they handled discomfort. They said the story sounded insane because real life was sometimes insane. Those comments still stung, but they also reminded me of something. The internet did not know us. They only saw a sequence of events. They could not see his face when he asked if I hated him. They could not hear his small, broken pleas in the bedroom. They could not feel how the silence in the morning had felt like a threat. I kept reading anyway, because I could not stop. Each camp pulled me in a different direction. Prep people made it sound fixable with planning. Safety people made it sound dangerous if we ever tried again. Accidents happen people made it sound normal and survivable. Too much too fast people made it sound like a mistake we could learn from. Repair people made it sound like a conversation we had to face. Comedy people made it sound like a memory that would never die. I set my phone down and stared at my hands. The comments had not given me one clean answer. They had given me a mirror with 6 different reflections, and all of them were partly true. What scared me most was not the idea of trying again. What scared me was what would happen if we never talked. And the worst night of our marriage became the only story we both remembered when we touched. I heard movement down the hallway. My husband's footsteps, slow and careful, like he was checking whether I was in a safe mood. I glanced at the bedroom door and felt my stomach tighten again, not from smell, but from dread. I had asked strangers to judge us, and they had done it with joy. Now I had to decide what their judgment meant. So was this a one-time trauma, or a lesson that made us stronger? I refreshed the page so many times that my thumb started to ache. Every time I thought the storm had slowed, another wave of replies hit, and the tone changed again. Some people sounded kind. Some sounded angry. Some sounded excited to have something shocking to talk about. The worst ones acted like my marriage was a joke that belonged to them now, like my husband's private request was just content. I told myself I had asked for input, so I had to accept the answers. But the longer I read, the less it felt like advice. It felt like being surrounded, the same points repeated over and over until they stopped feeling helpful. Preparation, safety, consent, pace, talk, clean, repeat. The words blurred together. Even the good comments started to sound like scolding when 100 strangers said the same thing in different ways. The jokes spread the fastest. People kept repeating the part about our dog. They wrote it like it was the only thing that mattered, like the whole night was just a funny clip. Some people said they were laughing to cope. Some people laughed because they did not care who it hurt. I read both, and my stomach still tightened the same way. Then the pushback came from the other direction. A few people accused me of making my husband look bad. They said I sounded disgusted and cruel. They said I should have protected him instead of posting. They said I was the problem for even telling anyone. Other people said the opposite. They said he had been reckless. They said he should not have asked for extra intensity on a first attempt. They said he had put both of us at risk by adding things that reduced communication. I sat there watching strangers argue about my husband like they knew him. They talked about his character, his masculinity, his motives, his intelligence. They used harsh words that made my face burn, even though nobody knew our names. I kept thinking about him in the other room, moving quietly, pretending the day was normal. The comments kept coming, and my mind started doing something I did not expect. It started rewriting the night, depending on what I read last. When I read the safety comments, I felt scared and angry, like we had done something dangerous without understanding it. When I read the accident comments, I felt protective and sad, like the night was just bad luck, and my job was to be gentle. When I read the jokes, I felt disgust and panic again, like I could still smell everything, like I was still trapped in that moment. I realized I was letting strangers set the emotional frame for my marriage. That scared me more than the mess ever did. I wrote an edit. I did it slowly, choosing words that did not attack him, because even in anonymous form, I could not stand the idea of betraying him. I clarified that preparation existed. I admitted I had learned that after the fact, and that we had not done it. I wrote that my husband had been less informed and had not planned well. I wrote that I was not trying to shame him. I wrote that I was shocked and overwhelmed, and that I felt guilty for how I had reacted in panic. I stared at the screen before posting the edit, because part of me feared that even admitting he was unprepared would feel like blame. But pretending we had done everything right felt worse. It felt like lying to protect a fantasy while ignoring reality. I posted the edit and watched the replies shift again. Some people softened immediately. They said it was a learning experience. They said to talk, to reset, to slow down. They told me to focus on trust, not perfection. Other people doubled down. They said I was making excuses. They said we should never have attempted it without research. They said it proved we were immature. They said we deserved the consequences. A few comments were sharp in a different way. They told me not to treat preparation like a magic solution, and not to treat my husband like a child who needed to be managed. They said it had to be a joint conversation, not a list of rules I brought to him like a punishment. That one hit me because it was true. I had started imagining myself walking into the bedroom with a speech. I pictured myself saying, "Here is what the internet said. Here is what you did wrong. Here is what we will do next time." Even in my head, it sounded like a trial. I did not want to win. I wanted my husband back. More noise filled the thread. People asked for updates. People demanded details. People made guesses. People tried to be helpful and ended up being graphic or mocking. The thread stopped feeling like a place where I could breathe. It started feeling like a crowd outside our house, pressing their faces to the windows. I locked my phone and sat in silence for a long time. The quiet, after all, that typing felt like ringing in my ears. Then I heard my husband again, small sounds from the hallway, a cabinet opening, a cup placed down carefully, a slow step, then another. He moved like he was trying not to disturb something fragile. I suddenly felt ashamed for reading so many comments without talking to him first. I had gone to strangers because I was scared of his eyes. I was scared that if I saw what I had done to him, I would break. But it also felt like the internet had handed me one clear truth through all the noise. The comments were not only advice, they were noise. The only advice that mattered was the kind that helped me speak to the person I loved without making him feel smaller. I picked up my phone again and looked at the edit I had added. I imagined him reading it. I imagined him seeing strangers laugh at his private desire. The thought made my chest tighten with a different kind of fear, sharp and protective. I knew I could not show him the thread, not like that, but I also knew I could not keep it from him forever. Secrets grew teeth. If he found it later, it would feel like I had taken his most vulnerable moment and handed it to a crowd. I stood up and walked toward the bedroom, rehearsing a simple sentence in my head. I had posted because I was scared. I wanted advice. I wanted to fix this. I was sorry. My hand hovered near the doorframe, and I heard him inside the room, not moving, like he had been waiting. In that moment, all the comments became background. All the camps and lectures and jokes faded, because the real verdict did not come from the internet. It came from one person, and I still did not know what he was going to say when I stepped into the room. He sat on the edge of the bed with his elbows on his knees, fully dressed like he had planned to leave the room and never come back. When I stepped inside, he looked up fast, like he expected me to be angry. I closed the door behind me, and the click sounded too loud. I stood there for a moment with my hands at my sides, because I did not know what to do with them. The room still felt wrong. Even with clean sheets and candles, it did not feel like a place for comfort. It felt like a place where something fragile had shattered. I said his name again, this time louder. My voice still shook. He nodded once. His eyes stayed on my face, not blinking much, like he was waiting for a verdict. I sat down on the other side of the bed, leaving space between us. That space was not rejection. It was caution. I did not trust my own body yet. I did not trust that I would not remember everything at once and start gagging again. I told him I loved him. I said it slowly, so it did not sound like a quick fix. His face twitched, like the words hurt because he wanted to believe them, but did not know if he was allowed to. He said he was sorry. I shook my head and said I was sorry too. I told him I had panicked. I told him that when he signaled to stop, my brain had turned into noise and fear, and I had tried to fix something that could not be fixed in that moment. I did not excuse it. I just named it. He stared at the floor and said, I felt like I died. The way he said it made my stomach drop. Not because he was dramatic, but because it sounded honest. Like part of him had gone still in the middle of the chaos, and he had watched it happen from far away. He said he could not stop seeing my face. He said he kept replaying the moment where he realized he had lost control of his body. He said he did not care about the mess as much as he cared about what I might think of him afterward. I told him the truth. I said I had felt disgust, but it had not been disgust at him. It had been disgust at the situation, the smell, the panic, the helplessness. I told him I had never stopped loving him for even 1 second, even when I had wanted to crawl out of my own skin. He swallowed and nodded, but his eyes watered anyway. He asked me again, quietly, if I hated him. I slid a little closer, and said no. I said I did not hate him. I said I admired him for trusting me enough to ask. I said the request had surprised me because he always acted so traditional, so controlled, and I had not known he carried that desire in silence. That was when his face finally cracked. He pressed his palm to his eyes and started crying, the kind of crying he always tried to hide. It made something in my chest loosen because it meant he was still here with me, still human, still reachable. I did not touch him right away. I asked if it was okay first. He nodded, and I put my hand on his shoulder. He leaned toward me like he had been holding himself upright with shame, and finally let it go. When he calmed down, he said he had pushed too hard. He admitted he had wanted the full fantasy on the first try. He said the restraints and the gag had sounded exciting in his head, but when reality hit, he had felt trapped. I told him that scared me too. I told him I could not handle the gag again, not because I wanted to shame him, but because it was not safe for us, especially if either of us felt sick. I told him I needed clear words next time, not signals. I needed the ability to stop fast, without thinking, without guessing. He nodded again, and for the first time since the night before, he spoke like himself. He said we would do it differently if we ever did it again. He said we would plan. He said we would go slow. He said we would protect the bed like adults and not pretend we were immune to reality. I let out a breath I did not know I had been holding. Then he asked the question that scared me more than the mess. He asked if I still wanted to try again. For a second, I could not answer. My mind flashed to the sound of gagging, the smell, the dog running into the room, the way the morning silence had felt like a crack in the foundation. My stomach tightened like it wanted to refuse on instinct, but I also pictured his face when he had first told me what he wanted. Not the fantasy part, the trust part, the vulnerable part. I told him I did not want that night to be the final meaning of his desire. I said I wanted us to be okay. I said I wanted him to feel safe asking for things, even if the answer was sometimes no. He whispered, I cannot go through that again. I said neither could I then. I said something that was true and also a little desperate. I said, if we tried again with preparation and slower steps, it likely could not be worse than what had already happened. He gave a short, shaky laugh, and it was the first laugh we had shared since the night before. It did not fix everything, but it broke the spell. He squeezed my hand once, like a promise. Then he hesitated and asked something else, very softly, like he expected me to pull away. He asked if, at some point, I would let him try something similar with me. He did not say it in a demanding way. He said it like he wanted fairness, or closeness, or maybe just proof that we were still a team. I felt my face heat up, but I did not feel anger. I felt the weight of how exposed we both were now. I told him we could talk about it. I told him I was open to it, if we did it safely and slowly, and if we both felt ready. I told him this was not a punishment or a trade. It was just us trying to meet each other in the middle without rushing. He nodded and leaned his forehead against mine for a moment, careful and quiet. One honest talk changed the whole meaning of that night. It stopped being a private disaster that might poison our marriage. It became a mistake we had survived together. But when we lay back on the bed afterward, still fully clothed, I felt the fear waiting under my skin like an old bruise, because trying again meant facing fear on purpose. After that talk, the house felt quieter in a different way. Not empty, not punished, just careful. I kept thinking about what trust really meant, because I had always believed trust meant loyalty and honesty. I had not realized it also meant being seen in a moment you could not control. I had seen my husband helpless and scared. He had seen me panic and lose my ability to comfort him. That night had not tested our desire. It had tested our ability to stay kind when our bodies embarrassed us. We did not pretend it was funny, not at first. The jokes from strangers stayed in my head like noise I could not turn off. But in our bedroom, there was nothing funny about it. There was only a simple truth. We had tried something new without enough knowledge, and we had added extra intensity when we did not even understand the basic steps. When we started planning what came next, we did it like we were rebuilding a boundary line that had been knocked over. We agreed on rules before anything else. We agreed that we would never mix fear with play again. If either of us felt even a small panic, we stopped. No waiting. No trying to push through. No trying to fix a situation in the moment. We agreed that we needed clear communication that did not depend on guessing. Not signals, not hints, words. We needed the kind of stop that could not be misunderstood, even if the room was loud, even if one of us froze. We agreed there would be no gag. Not because it was shameful, but because it removed safety from our hands. The memory of him gagging and needing air had burned that lesson into me. It was not about fantasy anymore. It was about risk. We agreed there would be no restraints at all until we had rebuilt confidence with something simple and slow. That was hard for him to say out loud, because I knew the restraint part had been tied to his fantasy. But he said it anyway, and I heard what it really meant. He wanted to try again, but he wanted to feel safe with me more than he wanted the scene. Then we talked about preparation, and it felt awkward at first because it forced us to speak plainly about the body. He admitted he had not researched enough. He admitted he had rushed because he was excited and nervous. I admitted I had followed his lead because I wanted to support him, even when my instincts told me we were moving too fast. We decided that next time we planned the environment like adults. We protected the bed. We kept cleaning supplies nearby. We treated it like something that could be messy, not because we expected disaster, but because we respected reality. That part mattered more than I expected. because the biggest wound from that night was not the stain on a sheet. It was the feeling that romance had turned into a crisis. Planning felt unromantic, but it also felt like care. It felt like saying, I wanted you, and I also wanted you safe. We also talked about aftercare, a word I used to think belonged to other people. I realized aftercare was just a serious name for something simple. It meant not leaving your partner alone with shame. It meant reassurance. It meant checking for pain and checking for feelings. It meant not going silent just because you were embarrassed. When I pictured the morning after, the coffee, the distance, the way we moved around each other like strangers, I understood how quickly silence could become damage. That was when I told him something else. I told him I had posted online. I said it fast, and then waited for him to hate me. My heart hammered like I was about to be punished. I explained I had not used names, that I had been scared and overwhelmed, and that I had needed advice because I did not know what was normal and what was dangerous. He stayed quiet for a long time, and that silence scared me more than any comment ever had. Then he asked one question. He asked if people had been cruel. I did not lie. I said yes. His jaw tightened, and I expected anger at me. But what I saw was something else. Protective anger that had nowhere to go. He looked down at his hands and said he never wanted anyone to laugh at that moment because it had been the worst moment of his life. I promised I would never show him the thread. I promised I would not turn our private life into entertainment. I told him I had already learned what I needed from it anyway. Not the jokes, not the insults, the warning signs, the safety issues, the reminder that our relationship mattered more than any fantasy. He nodded once, and the tension in his shoulders eased a little. Later, when we talked about his question, about trying something with me too, we kept it in the same tone. Slow, safe, no pressure, no performance, just curiosity with respect. I did not agree to anything immediately. I only agreed to keep the conversation open because I did not want either of us to feel trapped by a promise. And that was the real change. Before, we had treated the fantasy like a goal. After, we treated trust like the goal. This was not only a sex story. It was a communication story. I knew some people wanted details and a neat ending, but life did not give neat endings. I also knew there was more to say later, and I had shared that there was a separate update, but I did not put it here. I kept this part focused on what mattered most, which was the repair. So I wanted to ask you something directly, because I wished someone had asked me before that night. If you were us, what rules would you set before trying again? What would your safety checklist look like? What would you say out loud before anything started? How would you protect your partner from shame if an accident happened? And how would you rebuild closeness after a night that left both of you quiet in the same bed? They said they would try again, but trying again meant walking back into the room where fear lived. And the question that stayed with me was simple. Would the next time bring healing or another shock?